Welcome to Dive Deeper. We've got a new leader sharing for the first time tonight.
Hi, I'm Janet.
All right, and we've got a couple exciting announcements for you tonight. So who saw the post from OneCon last weekend?
I did. You might remember last year OneCon was an online watch party, and that was okay, but this year it's going to be in person.
Yeah, so June 4th, that's a Saturday, they are planning an in-person OneCon. So that's awesome, and it will be a shortened version of what it used to be. It used to be Friday night until Saturday night, but this year it's just from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday. So the cost will be $25, and we'll get a bunch of vans, and we'll all drive up together, and it'll be short, but it'll be awesome.
Okay, second announcement, spring retreat. Last fall we had an awesome time at Kingswood Camp, so we're doing another retreat this spring. It'll be May 20th to the 22nd, that's Friday till Sunday afternoon. It will be a chill time relaxing with everybody, and we'll have a special speaker and worship times. We'll have lots of games and free time too. The cost will be $20 each. We'll have registration forms coming out in April probably.
All right, so how about this for a warm-up question? For those of you who were at the retreat last fall, what were some of your favorite parts? Tell the other people in your group, maybe who weren't there, what it was like.
And then also give any suggestions of ways you think the retreat this spring could be even better.
All right, Janet, so what stood out to you in this week's reading?
I love the parable that Jesus told to Peter, starting in verse 21.
All right, so that's the one where Peter asks how much we should forgive people, and Jesus tells a story about a servant who owed a huge debt to the king, and the king forgives it. But then that servant goes and doesn't forgive a small debt that another servant owes him. So basically, the first servant didn't show forgiveness like the king had showed to him.
Yeah, and Jesus ends the parable like this. The king called the servant he had just forgiven to come to him and said, "You evil servant, I forgave you the tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you?" Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart.
Oh man, that's kind of intense. So what did you get out of that parable?
When you hold on to unforgiveness, it's really only hurting you. Someone once said, holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Forgiving others does not mean what they did was right. It does not mean you were okay with the way they treated you. It doesn't mean you'll forget what happened.
I think those are really helpful and important clarifications to make, because I think lots of people do think that forgiveness is basically saying like it's okay to what they did, but you don't say that. So thank you, Janet. So what is forgiveness then?
Forgiveness is letting go of the need to get revenge. Forgiving others frees us from anger. God has forgiven us a huge debt. God has forgiven us of all of our sin. We are to forgive others just as Jesus has forgiven us. And if there's someone you need to forgive, you might need to ask God to change your heart and give you the desire to forgive that person.
All right, well, why don't we stop there for a discussion question? Is there anyone that you need to forgive?
All right, Oliver, what stood out to you this week?
Well, it's a little connected to your section about forgiveness, so I'm glad that you unpacked that whole thing. So what stood out to me is how that parable is connected with the section that goes before it.
Okay, what section goes before it?
So it's the passage that I actually talked about last fall at rally night. I don't know if you remember that, but it's about resolving conflict in relationships. It's about how if you see another Christian sinning, you should confront them about it because you know it's not good for them.
Right, so at rally night, you had talked about how first you confront them one-on-one, then if they don't listen, you bring another person or two, finally you bring it to a higher authority, in this case, the whole church.
Exactly. So these are important principles for how to confront someone about sin in their life. And I think it's so important to talk about that because our culture has this attitude that it's judgmental and wrong to ever tell someone, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Or when you said this or that, God doesn't want you to do that because it's not what's best for you. It will hurt you or hurt other people. Our culture says that it's hateful and judgmental to ever call someone out on their sin.
Yeah, that's so true. But here Jesus says that we should confront other believers if they are sinning. That's what he says in verse 15. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over.
Exactly. But remember, he's not talking about non-Christians here. Like, if someone isn't trying to follow Jesus, we shouldn't tell them, hey, you're disobeying God by doing this or that. Because it's like they're not actually trying to follow Jesus in the first place. The other thing I wanted to point out is how this section is connected to the passage before it, the parable of the lost sheep. Janet, could you read that?
All right, Matthew 18:12-14. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish.
Thanks. So this parable talks about how God's heart breaks when his children, like sheep, wander away and get into trouble. So this is a metaphor for wandering away from following Jesus and falling into sinning and disobeying God. The point I think Matthew is making is connecting this parable with the other section about confronting people's sin. His point is to show the heart behind why we would confront someone.
Okay, so you're kind of getting into the application question about how this changes your desires, what you love.
Exactly. We don't confront other people's sin to be mean or, because we think we're better than them. We confront our fellow brothers and sisters out of love to try to help them experience their best life. We're like the shepherd who doesn't want his lost sheep to get eaten by wolves. We go and talk to our friends who are trying to follow Jesus. And we tell them what they're doing isn't good because we love them and we want what's best for them.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good point for a discussion break. Here's the question. Have you ever had someone confront you in a loving way? What did they do that made it helpful? If you have a Christian friend who you need to confront, how could you do that lovingly? And just to be clear, with the second question, don't tell us the details of that person's sin. It's not a time to gossip about them.
All right, so why don't you discuss those questions now? All right, well, we hope that you had a great discussion.
And why don't you take out your journals now and discuss any questions or thoughts that you had from your reading this week.
All right, have a good time. See you later.